How's it going? Welcome back, my wise ones, to a great video today as we're taking a look at Samson. Now, this is a very interesting AA game, and you know what I say when it comes to AA games? That's where you can find creative ideas executed, okay?
That's good. Hey, oh, what's that? That Dr. Pepper?
Compared to AAA slop now that want to replace most of their developers with AI machines.
What?
But at the same time, the risk with AA games is it can sometimes feel unfinished, it can sometimes lack that polish, or they can sometimes have too much of a big appetite, you know, they can have massive ambitions and it doesn't actually pay off. And Samson sadly falls somewhere in between those lines, okay? Today I'm going to be giving you my Samson game review because this is a very interesting game, and when you look at it, the first thing that probably comes to your mind is it looks like GTA because you're being chased by police, you're driving around a kind of dark, gritty city, and you are obviously doing criminal activities. But what this actually is it kind of reminds me of the driving mechanics of Burnout Paradise or something, you know, similar to that, or Mad Max, and then the fisticuff gameplay of, you know, just melee combat also reminds me of something like Arkham. So this is not a GTA clone, even though a lot of people are calling it a GTA clone. This is, you know, a game that actually respects your time. It's not going to be massively bloated. The actual world that you get to explore is pretty tiny. It's like a, you know, little cut off, you know, city island that you can explore, and in aesthetic and in tone it does remind me of like GTA 4, Liberty City, small gritty grungy city that you get to explore, and it has exactly that kind of infamous vibe. And at times it does feel like this game almost feels like 2 generations behind, and that's a compliment in some areas, and in some ways it's not. So I'm going to get into the positives and negatives of this Samson game review based on the early access coverage that press has managed to see and all of that jazz, and the gameplay shown to us press, okay? So I'm going to go off of that. But what you need to understand is this game is very tightly designed in what it wants to deliver. And what I like about it is it gives you options, but it's not an open world game. So basically what you need to know of this game is you are in debt, okay? And as if, you know, the real world isn't difficult enough because we are all struggling financially. I'm pretty sure I'm not alone. Everyone is struggling financially at this point because of inflation. And of course the 1% super wealthy that are now profiting off of all of these algorithms, data, and AI, and keeping the rest of us enslaved. You know, we truly do live in times of a dystopia, so it's pretty difficult out there to make a living, and this captures that feeling of, you know, basically being indebted to some very bad people, and it captures that 90s aesthetic as well very nicely.
Oh shit, here we go again.
So I do hope you enjoy this Samson game review based on the early access stuff, and you subscribe, become a wise one today, use your critical thinking for some good, and if you'd like, check out my electronic music. That would be very awesome of you. My new album is out right now, or coming out very soon, and if you do like a deeper look at video games, dissecting its themes and philosophy, or philosophical content, you're in the right place. Subscribe, become a wise one. I would appreciate it. So first, let's just touch on the story, and we're going to go into positives and negatives, and I'm going to tell you why it is promising, but at the same time, you should probably hold off because this has basically been released too early, in my opinion, and it needs longer to cook, basically, because the combat, especially in this, is very janky. The animations are pretty terrible, but the story itself is quite interesting, and you can tell that the voice actors and the people behind it truly do care. And I really do appreciate that they have given their all to this. It is using the Unreal 5 engine slop engine, sadly. That's why it looks kind of, you know, very grainy and kind of similar to other games with the puddles and all that kind of stuff. But it does give this, you know, a bit more of a kind of AAA polish vibe, and they have done well with the art style using Unreal Engine to its advantage here, which I do appreciate. They haven't just slapped it on. So basically what you need to know is this town is in complete disarray, okay? It's completely collapsed. Basically everyone is suffering. You're going to see all kinds of, depressing people on the streets, and some of them might actually ask you to just basically do them in because they've had enough of life. So it's a pretty bleak game in some areas. But also it is trying to play itself seriously. It's not trying to be a joke, not like Just Cause, where you would think that these developers would, kind of go for that angle, considering it is a smaller team who, worked on that series and now are working on this. But no, it is trying to be very serious, but it does have some kind of gallow humor in there along the way. But basically, you need to understand that what you did was a heist which basically went wrong for your gang, and now you're basically, paying off a debt that your sister has gotten into, with some very bad people. So constantly you'll be fighting off debt collectors. You have to actually pay back a certain amount of money each day, and the whole fun of this game, the why it actually is kind of creative in a AA space, is because it takes risks. It actually has choices and consequences throughout this game. Now, it's not an RPG or anything like that. Basically, you have to take certain risks and chances because you need to complete jobs to, basically bring in that cash to pay off at the end of each day. And you can take these jobs throughout the day, but they are basically tied to certain times in the day. So it's not a true open world game. Like, each mission will actually progress for time, as it were. So, one mission might only be available, or job might be available during the day or the evening or at night, and then by the end of it you need to see how much cash you have. But if you fail at something, then you actually could lose that cash, so it could set you back. So you need to think, is it actually worth the trade-off by completing these jobs that are kind of optional along with the main mission, and manage your time and your cash. It's got that risk-reward gameplay which I really like.
That's good. Hey, what's that? That Dr. Pepper?
Now, the first big positive I would say is the actual driving mechanics, okay? So basically this is, kind of an arcadey driving system. Like I said, it reminds me of Mad Max or Burnout Paradise or the Burnout games of old, where you'll be drifting around, pulling off different stunts, and actually the more damage you cause, the more kind of XP you can gain at the end of each day, which actually helps you by destroying, like political signposts or just carnage and stuff like that, or crashing into other cars. You can actually take out your enemies that way as well. So it rewards, kind of that old school car combat system, not like shooting rockets off your car, but just bashing into them. Very realistic kind of stuff. But sadly, the damage system on the cars, the details, isn't as detailed as I would like. It's not, anywhere near the levels of like GTA 4, which is a game that came out ages and ages ago at this point. So it can feel a little bit stiff with, the animations. And overall, just the art style, like I said, that is a huge positive. I think they have, truly cluttered the city. And even though it is very small and condensed, which I like because it doesn't waste your time then, and you can explore all of it, it's not one of those games where you can just, roam around and find, random encounters or anything like that. It's not like a living and breathing world. It's more so a playground in which you take these jobs and missions, and it's big enough for that, but you don't want to go off and explore because there's nothing really to explore. It kind of almost is a little bit, similar to Mind's Eye in that way, which is not a, a favorable comparison. And I do think they have done a good job from what I have seen with the police system. But you won't be getting into shootouts or anything like that. It is very much a melee focused game. You can pick up certain objects like baseball bats or glass bottles and use them to throw at the enemy or just to bash someone. But again, it's not as satisfying as I would like. The sound effects can be good. It's a bit of a mixed bag. But the actual animations, this is where I get into the negative. So this is where it gets into the negatives, and that is with the animation of the combat and the melee system. Okay, so it's kind of going for that Sleeping Dogs style where you can grapple an enemy and then chuck them into the environment and like fry them on some kind of loose wires or, you know, bash them over the head, like I said, with a baseball bat or a glass bottle or a brick or something like that, or just, you know, push them through, you know, a fence which collapses on them. You know, there is some destructible environments here, but the problem is it's not fluid at all in its actual execution. It feels very stiff. Some of the NPCs will literally just kind of float and get stuck on certain objects. So here's your skill tree, because yes, you do actually have a skill tree in Samson. So basically your instinct, this primarily affects your health, your adrenaline, you know, so how much stamina you will get during a fight, how much damage you can actually take. And, you know, it's a very small, you know, like skill tree. And it's not, like I said, trying to be an RPG or anything, but it does give you some flexibility in your build as Samson as you progress through the game, which I like. Tactics is where you get your buffs and your different kind of, you know, kind of skill moves when it comes to the combat itself, pulling them off. So that's a good one to invest in. I mean, basically your aggression is your damage output, and you can enter this kind of rage mode where you go completely batshit insane, you know, Christian Bale levels of fury. And then cunning is basically all about finesse, because yes, finesse is actually very important as a criminal. Who would have guessed? So basically each day there's going to be different things to actually, you know, like check off. It's not like an open world where you need to check off all of these things. They're optional, but there's things like stashes, points of interest that you can go check out. Not, you know, like lively stuff happening in the world, but there will be like kind of mini things happening that aren't exactly full missions, but something you can discover. There are collectibles, like you can pick up magazines and stuff like that. So it's one of those kind of linear story games where there are side things to interact with, but they're not completely necessary. The main thing is the missions that, you know, progress the story, and then these jobs that actually is a way to earn cash, because that, funny enough, that's the whole point of this game, is to earn cash. If you don't have enough cash, you will get ambushed. There will be people chasing you down. And yeah, that's the whole point of this story. Sadly, by the looks of it, it doesn't really progress from that. The whole game is centered around these mechanics. That's why I feel like it needed longer to cook, because animation-wise, it's janky. The combat system is kind of bare bones. I would say that is a positive, you know, having these jobs that you can take on and managing the time of when to take these jobs and what jobs to take. So you are constantly thinking, you know, like if this is worth, you know, the investment. So there's always like pressure points constantly. So it's always giving you some levels of stress, and that's very, you know, it makes it feel much more immersive for a game like this, which is trying to be somewhat, you know, kind of semi-realistic and kind of gritty. So I think they did a good job with those mechanics. And, you know, even just like things like repairing your car, because funny enough, that's going to cost a lot of money. You're not, you know, like bowling like in GTA where you can just, you know, go and pimp your ride or anything like that. Like spending money, damaging your car, this, you know, are big things to think of. So, you know, when you are driving around or taking out enemies in your car, you actually have to drive carefully. You can't just bash into everything, which I do like. So basically in this town or little city, everyone is addicted to this drug called White Whisper, and you're going to see that come up a lot throughout the game, throughout the story. You know, a lot of these characters rely on that, and you can do some pretty dark things in this game. Like, it doesn't shy away from those adult themes, which I do appreciate. You know, there's even side jobs where you'll actually be, you know, kind of trafficking organs across the city and stuff like that, which is pretty disgusting and dark. And it doesn't shy away from you being the bad guy. So basically it's a good thing because there's no disconnection, whereas in other open world games, you know, if you do something bad, you know, it doesn't really make sense and the story just pretends like it never happened. But in this, it makes a lot more sense. But it's not a super populated game. Like, there's not tons of NPCs like roaming around, just like walking and stuff like that. So don't expect it to be super populated. I won't say it's as bad as Mind's Eye, but definitely I feel like this needed more, you know, time in the oven because it does feel a little bit empty at times.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Now, if I had to get into some philosophical or analysis about the themes of Samson, I would say that, you know, it kind of reflects the idea of when you create a society, kind of like the one we're living in right now, where there's so much economic pressure, you know, thanks to late stage capitalism, that the average person can't even think about virtue anymore, can't even think about doing the correct thing. because they are just not getting by in their day-to-day lives. Basically, the market itself replaces virtue. That is the output for this society, so it leads people to do bad things just to get by. They basically are replicating what they see is happening to the greater society, the people at the top, for, you know, like 1%. If they are succeeding by doing unjust actions, then of course they will try and replicate that. Samson has accepted his place in society of, you know, doing these kind of disgusting acts, and he's kind of made his peace with, you know, being a low-life criminal. So it's kind of a sad reflection of what happens when people become desperate enough, and a society that reflects that. And there's a lot of struggle in this. There's a lot of like family connections with your gang and your sister. So the story does go interesting. The story does actually lead to some interesting questions, and the story overall I would say is decent, but the execution, sadly, with the actual combat itself needs to be a lot better. And the driving is the best thing about this game, and the mission variation, you know, the kind of dark missions that you do take, that is kind of fun because it almost feels like you're playing like a thriller TV show at times. But there are things to mix it up, like there are sometimes targets that you have to take out, so there's kind of assassination missions as well, but you don't have any of these tools like, you know, weapons, so it makes everything much more, you know, just like realistic, because you literally have to take out these other people with just, you know, a car and your own two hands, which is kind of cool and different compared to other games of this kind of vibe. So that is my Samson review, my Samson early access look and review of this game, just reviewing the early access stuff. But honestly, I do think that this could have been great if they just, you know, had more of a budget, they gave it longer in development, and gave it more time to cook, because the ideas are there, but the execution sadly is lacking. It's not like Mind's Eye where that is a complete fake game. Like, you can tell the people behind this actually care, they're trying to create something different, and it succeeds on a system level, but where it fails is polish, because it does feel clunky, the sound effects sometimes are just off, and just the overall gameplay gets repetitive, unless if they change things up later on that I haven't seen. But there you go, that's what you need to know about Samson. I would wait for this game to get patched, to get, you know, more updates, fixes. This is the type of game that probably will get much better if you give it some time to develop longer, and hopefully we see support for this game later down the road. So let me know what you think about Samson, my wise ones, if you're going to be picking this up or not. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you are new, give the video a like, I would appreciate it, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace out.